Howdy, check it out. It's a handheld. It's small, compact, convenient in every sense of the word. Nah. Handle's all you need.
So, let me ask you this. What is the traditional way to play home console games? Is it connecting a small machine with two wires, one powering the machine and the other one displaying an image on the TV? If you answered yes, then you'd be correct. This has been the standard for as long as video games have existed, but sometimes something gets released that'll mix things up a bit, you know? Introducing the Vectrex, a portable video game console. Okay, I say portable, but it's just really easy to transport around from place to place like the GameCube. It's not portable in the same vein as the Game Boy Advance, but I'm pretty sure anybody with functioning eyes could tell.
Except me.
The Vectrex was released in November of 1982 thanks to the company General Consumer Electronics, and saw some success despite being an expensive console due to its unique use of vector graphics, which is why it needed its own monitor in the first place. However, there was one cataclysmic event that loomed over the Vectrex that would soon lead to its downfall. So why don't we find out if the initial price of $199 was actually worth it or not? The Vectrex has obviously got some bulk, but it won't take up too much space on your setup. The unit itself is also very light, which helps with transporting it around from place to place. The Vectrex uses a 9-inch CRT display, and unlike other consoles out at the time that used a peasant's pixel graphics, the Vectrex used vector graphics, similar to early arcade games like Star Wars or Tempest. This is why the Vectrex had its own monitor, since home TVs didn't have the technology necessary to display vector graphics. The downside to this was the lack of color. The Vectrex can only display in black and white, so GCE tried to get around this with overlays, but that aspect could make it less appealing to most consumers. The controller, on the other hand, was definitely the best the second generation had to offer. Not that it had much competition to begin with. The controller can be stored on the console, making transportation much less awkward. The controller itself is actually pretty good for its generation, and is mainly notable for having multiple buttons without adding a stupid numerical keypad. Why did they do this? Why? All in all, I like this controller. It's functional, and that's all I really need from it. For those of you that were wondering, the cartridge slot is located on the left side of the console, and the carts themselves aren't really anything to write home about. It's mostly in the artwork department. The design is just so bland and unappealing. It's got no flair or characterization at all. It's literally just a gray grid-lined background with a logo pasted on top of it. Just compare that to any other video game console out at the time, like the Atari 2600. Just look at the Atari version of Berserk compared to the Vectrex version of Berserk. The Atari has this beautiful, awesome, cool-looking artwork that just tells a player, hey, that game looks like fun. I want to play that game. The Vectrex literally has nothing to say. It's just Berserk. Sure, at the end of the day, it's the game that matters and not the art, but it's like the Mega Man 1 box art to me. It just bugs the out of me. But what if you didn't have any games for the Vectrex? Well, luckily for you, it came with one built-in game. Mindstorm. To put it simply, Mindstorm is just an Asteroids clone, but a pretty damn good one at that. I'd even say it's superior to Asteroids. You play as a small ship. You can turn clockwise or counterclockwise, shoot with the 4 button, thrust in the direction you're facing with the 3 button, and teleport with the 2 button. Yeah, try to avoid that. The reason I think this game is better than Asteroids is thanks to the variety of mines that you'll go up against. See, in Asteroids, you're just going to be shooting at asteroids for the entire game. So why don't we quickly take a look at the variety of mines that Mindstorm has to offer. The first set of mines you encounter are called the floating mines, and true to their name, they just kind of float around. The only way you're dying from these is if you just aren't paying attention.
Alright, and...
Next up is the fireball mine. These guys have the same behavior as the floating mine, but with a twist. When you shoot one of these guys, a little projectile comes shooting out, making a beeline for your ship, and if it hits you... yeah. Then there's the magnetic mines. These mangy little shits follow you wherever you go, and because of that, they're even harder to avoid. Finally, the last mines you encounter are the magnetic fireball mines. As their name implies, they're a combo of the fireball and magnet mines. And much like a migraine, they're a gigantic pain in the ass. Then there's the mine layer. He lays mines. F*** him. Mindstorm may be a clone of Asteroids, but it's not an exact copy. It has the same gameplay, but it adds its own unique challenge, which I think keeps you coming back, compared to Asteroids, where it's just the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. I recommend this one. I think it's aged pretty well. Now, I only own 2 physical games for the Vectrex, so why don't we take a quick look at them, starting with the absolute classic, Berserk. Berserk's great. It's a multi-directional shooter released in 1980. You roam these halls blasting robots while trying to make your way to any exit you can reach with relative ease. Though there's a catch. You can't touch any of the walls, otherwise you die, and as you progress, the robots start to fire at you on sight with their numbers increasing as well. However, there's one obstacle I neglected to mention. It's the most terrifying, deadly thing known to man.
Alright, there we go.
This is Evil Otto. He'll randomly spawn and chase after the player. If he catches you, he'll give you cookies. And then stab you. Berserk is my favorite Vectrex game. It's fun, challenging, and easy to understand. It's still really fun to play to this day, and if you see it, pick it up. You won't regret it. Next up, Clean Sweep.
So, the best way I can describe this next game is Pac-Man, but once Pac-Man eats 12 pellets, he won't be able to eat anymore until he goes to use the bathroom. Also, he's a vacuum cleaner, and the ghosts are stapler movers.
I wouldn't call this game a Pac-Man clone, since it's much like Mindstorm in the fact that it takes the core gameplay of what it's trying to imitate and put its own spin on things. So in Clean Sweep, you play as a vacuum cleaner, take their word for it, and your goal is to suck up spilled money that robbers tried stealing from your bank. Take their word for it. Now, of course, the gameplay of this is so obviously Pac-Man. You have a maze of dots that you're trying to clear out whilst enemies chase you around and give you a hard time. You also have power-ups that you can use to turn the tables on said enemies, and there's 4 of them per maze. I wouldn't blame you if you wrote this off as a simple Pac-Man clone, but, much like a mugging, it surprises you. Similar to a real vacuum, your bag will eventually fill up. So in order to continue collecting dots, you'll have to empty the bag. This adds a new interesting layer of challenge that makes this game stick out amongst the sea of other Pac-Man clones. Though the games themselves are actually another huge problem with the Vectrex. Only 20 games were officially released for the console, with all of them being developed in-house by General Consumer Electronics and either published by them or Milton Bradley.
The Vectrex stood out in a sea of other video game consoles thanks to its built-in screen and vector graphics, but a lack of support, overblown market, and high asking price ultimately doomed the console for failure. Though I still think it's worth buying one if you can afford it, since it's still got a dedicated homebrew community that makes all kinds of games for it, including ports of Kaboom and Frogger. Also, my favorite thing about this console is the little startup jingle that plays whenever you boot the system up. It kinda sounds like the jingle that would play when somebody announces their accomplishments.
I found a cure for cancer.
I passed my SATs.
I killed 12 people. I cried for 45 minutes while trying to get out of bed this morning.